Number 10, starting off the list, is La Chimera, a film by Alice Rohrwacher. Again, the names are twisting me today. Italian filmmaker. This is an Italian film starring one of, if not my golden boy of acting right now, Josh O'Connor. This is a film that has pretty much haunted me ever since I've seen it, which was like 2 weeks ago. And I have, much like I was saying with The Brutalist, I have not been able to stop thinking about this film. Incredibly unique, just like The Brutalist in today's cinematic landscape. One of those films that when I saw it, I just thought this is one of one. This is just incredibly unique. It is a film that takes place during the 80s in Italy, and Josh O'Connor's character Arthur is just getting out of the bin. We got a lot of people in the bin and getting out of the bin in today's video. And as he's coming back to this town in Italy, he is rekindling with some buddies that he knows and that he works with. It's kind of hard to understand whether he wants to get back into the life that he used to have, the one that got him in trouble, but he kind of gets suckered back into it, and he is a grave robber. He's a grave robber, and they rob these ancient kind of tombs, these Etruscan tombs, and pretty much raid it of its relics and its valuables. Back when these tombs were built, the dead were buried with all kinds of relics and heirlooms that it was just a tradition in the way people were buried, and these things are antiques. These things are they belong in a museum, and they are incredibly valuable. And so what do these guys do? They go grave robbing during the day. They go grave robbing at night. And Arthur is kind of like the special key that helps all of it happen. He is kind of the navigator. He is skilled in being able to find where these tombs are, like a bloodhound sniffing out gold, and without him, it's very difficult to do. But once he comes back, he does his thing. He's got this God-given talent to be able to do it. And so in the process of this story unfolding, he takes up residence with an older Italian woman played by Isabella Rossellini and some other characters that he becomes friendly with. Some of them don't really know what he does, and as they become more entangled in his life and in his character, they realize, holy shit, this guy's a madman. He robs people's graves for a living. This film is so awesome because it is one gigantic metaphor, as simply as I could put it, in spending your entire life searching for something that is going to remove all doubt of the mystery of life and to remove all grief and trauma, to find some sort of treasure that will pay your way through the rest of your days. It's a nice little rhyme. And looking for an answer, just looking for an answer. This is a film about what it means to spend your life digging and praying that there is an answer to your woes and to your struggle in life. And Arthur's character is a character who's going through a whole lot of loss and a lot of trauma. And not only is grave robbing a great way to pay the bills if you don't get caught, it is a great kind of physical exercise in searching for something almost greater than your own existence and how it might bring you salvation. Again, this one jumped into my top 10 almost immediately. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since I've seen it. Super original. Josh O'Connor is, in terms of up-and-coming actors, just one of my very favorites, if not my favorite, and I'm going to be talking about him again later in this video. He's one of those guys that at this point, I will see anything he is attached to. He's got that X factor. I don't know, for me, every once in a while, like once a decade, there's an actor that just does that for me. I think back when I saw Inside Llewyn Davis for the very first time, when it came out in 2013, I was introduced to Oscar Isaac, and I just, almost like a cigar-chopping Hollywood executive, I was like, this guy's going places. This is the guy. And he's ended up blowing up and having an incredible career. I feel the same way about Josh O'Connor. His time is now, and this guy, I feel like he's going to be everywhere soon, and I am not going to complain about it one bit. I love him, and I love his character in this film. Everything about this film is so poetic and just beautiful, so haven't been able to stop thinking about it since I've seen it. And the detail, I have no clue how they made this movie. And with the detail of these tombs, I'm not sure if they built them. I don't know. It is so just breathtaking to look at. It is so cool. And yeah, every aspect of this film is awesome. That's really all I got. Number 9 is a film that needs no introduction at all, and is the film that I reviewed on the channel earlier this year, and that is Dune Part 2 by director Denis Villeneuve. This film has kind of slid down the ranks for me. I really enjoy it. After I saw Dune Part 2, and I've only seen it the one time when it came out in the theater, I went and I read the novel. And then I read Dune Messiah. Now, if you've read the novel, you would know that there's a pretty hefty amount of changes that Denis Villeneuve made in order to make this an adaptation that works. Some of those choices I'm not a huge fan of. Some of those choices, some of which are his own spin on the story, I thought were really well incorporated. I remember seeing it and I was really high on it when I saw it. But the more, after I walked away and I let it digest, I started to feel like something was missing, almost like we were rushed too quickly to a conclusion. And after reading the book, I understood why that was. And this is an adaptation that is streamlined to fit into two parts. And to me, sometimes feels a little bit rushed, but, in a perfect world, this would be a three-part adaptation. I don't know how that would work, but if it was up to me, that's what it would be, to have more time to develop these characters and kind of invest ourselves in this world. But given what tools Denis Villeneuve had at his disposal, this is about as good an adaptation of Dune as you're probably going to get. I don't necessarily think it's perfect, and I haven't really sung his praises so far in this video, but after reading the book, I hate comparing books to movies. I kind of feel like the book is almost always going to be better. But in terms of streamlining the story into two parts for a total of 5.5 hours, this is about as good as you're going to get for an adaptation of an epic novel like Dune. Everything on a visual standpoint, the epic scale of it, the action sequences in this film are just mind-blowing. Really, I don't really feel like I have anything else that needs to be said about this film. I feel like I'm just going to glaze over this one because it's been talked about a billion times on the internet. That's it, man. Sandworms and shit. Hell yeah. I cannot wait to see what Denny does with Dune Messiah. I have no clue what that adaptation would look like. I am very, very excited to see what he pulls out of his hat, what changes he might have to make. I don't even know where to begin with that one, but I'm very much looking forward to the future of Dune in our modern cinematic landscape. I already have a review on this film. If you want to see more of my thoughts on that, you can check out the review on this channel. Otherwise, we're going to move on to the next film, sitting at number 8. Evil Does Not Exist, the new film from Ryusuke Hamaguchi. Ryusuke Hamaguchi is a hell of a filmmaker. Drive My Car was near the tippity top of my favorite films of the year it came out. I believe that was 2021. In the same year, he released Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy, which was a film I liked, but left me wanting a little bit more. Evil Does Not Exist was exactly the type of film that I hoped he would make going forward. It took me a while to finally watch it. Probably the most recent film I watched on this list, and it absolutely skyrocketed up the rankings of my favorite films of 2024. I think this movie is fucking brilliant. In the first half hour of this film, it is absolutely slow as molasses. It is helping you build an understanding of the people who live in this small village. That's a small village outside of Tokyo, and we are seeing it through the lens of our character Takumi, played by Hitoshi Omika, and his daughter, and just seeing how these people live off of the land. They use the water. They use ingredients in their forest for cooking. They are completely dedicated to living off of the land this way. And they are kind of ambushed by investors from the city who are looking to use their little bit of nature as the backdrop for their glamping initiative. Glamping equals glamorous camping. This is kind of like a camping resort that is Instagram friendly for people to come and enjoy and get away from Tokyo and get away from the big cities in Japan to, you know, go on a vacation. But what this is going to cost the people who live there is the main conflict of this film. This is a film that is incredibly relevant to what we are going through today. How much can we take from our environment before we destroy it? And as the people in this town are being presented with this great opportunity for this glamping site, the locals are incredibly concerned about the water being poisoned, concerned about the deer. They live on a deer trail, and what's going to happen in terms of people who interact with the animals. This town and the way they live, the simple way that they live, is being flipped upside down by people who, you know, greedy capitalists who are biting off more than they can chew. This is a cautionary tale about, if you are going to push Mother Nature, how hard is she going to push back? And like often characters say in this film, there's a balance, and if you go too far, you upset the balance. And this is a film that illustrates what happens when we shift the balance, when we push it too far, when we try to take too much. And number 7, one that completely surprised me, shocked me, took me, you know, just came out of left field and just knocked me right out. And it is a film that has been pretty divisive in terms of its critical reception, but this is one that I'm a big fan of, that I've championed ever since I saw it at TIFF. It was the very last film I saw at TIFF, and it was a great bookend to that week at that festival, and that is Queer by Luca Guadagnino. You know, Luca G, as I like to call him. Guadagnino has been a filmmaker that's been on my radar for a long time. I remember when Call Me By Your Name was kind of his calling card and got a lot of people's attention, and that was a film I liked, but I didn't love, and I wasn't totally on the hype train in terms of his filmmaking. This is one of 2 films this year that came out. Anytime a filmmaker like this, of this echelon, releases 2 films that are both awesome in one year, my opinion of him has just skyrocketed. Much like I was saying about Hamaguchi, Luca has now become one of my favorite filmmakers working. Queer is one of those films, and I think a lot of us have them, where you see it and you're just like, this is awesome. This is straight up my alley. But man, some of the flaws are hard to look by. This is one of those films where I can understand the problems that people have with it. There is this intense, very chaotic, kind of kaleidoscopic, schizophrenic way of putting this story and these characters together. And it is a very, very archaic film. And you're at the center of this story. This is also based on a novel by William Burroughs, which, again, I would not have expected Luca Guadagnino to adapt a novel of William S. Burroughs, but here we are. And Daniel Craig plays a gay man living in Mexico in, I believe, the 1950s. Heroin addict. Got a lot of movies about heroin addicts this year. And him kind of traversing this landscape of living down south in the face of great stigma to his sexuality. And he's kind of just like this expat wandering the streets, to which he finds a younger man that he becomes attracted to and involved in. And the film is a very surreal, spiritual depiction of this lust, this longing, this romance between these 2 characters, and just how flawed everything about it is. One character incredibly broken and problematic, and one that can't help but fall for him, but there are just so many holes and cracks in the relationship that it's almost like it's just never going to be perfect enough to work. I did not expect it to be as bizarre and as much of an acid trip as it is. This is an incredibly surreal film, a very odd editing strategy. There's Nirvana in it, a Nirvana soundtrack. There's also a New Order needle drop. Considering the film takes place in the 1950s, the excessive use of modern music and slow-mo and scenes that are very, very apparently green screened this film is very odd looking and odd feeling. And much like the criticisms it gets, I sometimes look at those characteristics and think they're more of a feature and not a bug. This is a crazy fucking movie. And I think Luca Guadagnino aimed to make it that odd and off the wall and dysfunctional. And I gotta say, I think it works. Daniel Craig's performance is just one of my favorites of the year. Almost like we're dealing with a story from William S. Burroughs, but does feel like a character from the Beat Generation or something that Hunter S. Thompson would write. And it was this adventure film that is incredibly surreal and trippy and but at the same time incredibly heartfelt, and I connected with it big time. I loved it. I loved it. I think this film will be a cult classic somewhere down the line, and almost like Evil Does Not Exist, as I said before. 10 years from now, we're going to be thinking very highly of this film. I think this is one that is going to have its niche, its cult favorite audience that is going to champion it for years to come, and I think that I'm going to be a part of that. So, one of my biggest surprises of the year, and I'm glad to be on the Luca Guadagnino boat, I guess. Number 6, next up on the docket, is Conclave by Edward Berger. I'm a big fan of Ray Fiennes. I'm a big fan of films where we have to investigate the seedy underbelly of what should be a legitimate institution. I am a big fan of films where we are never quite totally sure of what we are seeing until we peer behind the curtain to really get a good glimpse of just how messed up of a situation we're in. And we're dealing with a situation where the Pope has died, and now there is a process to elect a new candidate to the papacy, and Ray Fiennes' character is tasked with being in charge of this conclave. All the while, we are seeing this roster of potential candidates coming in, to which all of them seem like they would be a good fit. And as the voting process begins, which, I was never totally sure of all the details of the voting process when it comes to electing a new pope. I thought it was very, very interesting how they do that, which is shown to you in this film. Every time they seem to get close, there is a scandal that pushes everything back. And Ray Fiennes' character for a lot of the film kind of feels like he's the only one taking it seriously. We need to get all of our ducks in a row to make sure we are doing the right thing for the church. This is something that billions of people have their eyes on. This is an incredibly important decision that we can't take lightly. And all the while, he is being very vigilant and being very disciplined. In this process, many are coming to him and saying, we're not going to find a perfect individual. Stop looking for that perfect individual. We are going to need to take the best that we can get. And what happens is, just like in politics, we are trying our damnness to elect the lesser evil because we really don't know if good exists in this scenario. You go through this supporting cast of characters, cardinals played by Stanley Tucci and John Lithgow, and many, many others, and they all have skeletons in their closet. They all have something they are hiding. And man, it's going to suck if it comes to light before the election because it's going to derail everything. And just as we get a little bit closer every single time, new gossip and new scandal comes out and completely turns the table, completely flips the table on the process of electing a new pope. Lots and lots of dirty laundry. And this is a film that, regarding the subject matter, you might not necessarily be excited by. This movie is so much fun. It is so much fun because it's just so fun to be in that environment where it's super serious and super grim, and we have to be deadly serious about how we pick this new pope. But all of the scandal that is being unraveled is somewhere between the current state of U.S. politics and like high school gossip. It's incredible how petty and juvenile every bit of it is, and just one another slew-footing and sabotaging other people's chances, and all of the scandals that Ray Fiennes' character has to stay on top of. And just I mean, if you're a film that, I mean, if you're a fan of films where there is constantly something new and suspenseful coming around the corner to bring new light to what is going on in the events. If you like a film where, not necessarily like a whodunit, but a film where the more and more we learn about what is happening here and the people involved in the situation, the more we are realizing what seems like an easy task is much more complicated and much more scary, and the fact that it is much more dangerous than we thought it could be. And if you're just a fan of films where you are given a trail, almost like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich crumb trail of scandal and issue and drama that makes things much, much more complicated as it goes along and ups the ante and ups the gravity of the scenario. If you love films that investigate that type of thing, then Conclave would be for you if you haven't seen it yet. Some of my favorite editing, some of my favorite cinematography on the year. Honestly, probably in terms of all the films I've talked about on this list, this was one that was one of the most fun, and like I thought it was a riot. Honestly, I thought it was a riot. Incredibly entertaining and enlightening in terms of how politics work within the church. Kind of, pulling back that veil and letting all us normal folks see what is really happening within the walls of the Vatican. And yeah, I thought it was just awesome. I thought it was a dandy. So there you go. Now we're smack dab in the middle of the top five. And I'm looking different and I'm wearing a different shirt, and that's because it's a different day. I can't even begin to tell you how long it's taken to film this. I don't know. I got tuckered out completely talking about films up until this point, and I'm just feeling rusty. It's been a while since I've made anything. So, got tired the other day, but it's a new day, and hopefully I have enough gas in the tank to crush this top five and move on finally. So, yeah, coming in at number 5, Bird by Andrea Arnold. Andrea Arnold is a filmmaker that, like, up until this point, she's one of those filmmakers where stylistically I'm like, man, I love everything about the way she makes films, and I love the subject matter that she tackles, and this really gritty, grounded realism that she works with. And I think the first film of hers I saw was Fish Tank, and I liked Fish Tank. But there's, I didn't truly love it, but everything about the way she makes films, every hallmark of her style is something where I'm like, man, this seems like something I would love. And I've kind of been waiting for her films to click with me. And Bird is that clicking. I was like, one day the click is gonna happen. Those tectonic plates are gonna shift, and I'm really gonna get into her filmography and understand her films and love them as much as I think I would. And Bird was that. Bird was that film for me that totally converted me. This is a film that I haven't really seen many people talk about at all. To be honest, I think the release it had was incredibly limited. But this was a film that I saw at TIFF, and it was one of my very favorite films at TIFF. I was absolutely floored by it. I was a mess by the end of it. I could barely walk straight coming out of the theater. That's how my socks were on the other side of the theater, and I had to go pick them up and put them back on. That is the neighborhood we're in. And in Bird, this is a film where a 12-year-old girl named Bailey it's a coming of age film, but it's very much watching this young teenager kind of navigating the environment they're in, and she's living in squalor with her brother and her father. Father's played by Barry Keoghan, plays this character named Bug, riddled with prison tattoos, kind of like if you had Barry Keoghan play Ryan Gosling's character from Place Beyond the Pines. But yeah, if you've ever seen Barry Keoghan play a freaky character in any film, which is what he usually does, this is no different. This is straight in his wheelhouse, absolutely. And his family, they're squatters in kind of this abandoned building, and the protagonist at the center of it, Bailey, is this girl who's just trying to make sense of her surroundings and trying to fit in, and she has friends that she kind of She runs with a certain crowd, but she's not necessarily welcome there, and she's totally at odds with her father in the personal life. And she's a loner. She's a total antisocial loner in this film. It kind of just like smack dab in this world that she doesn't understand or connect with or relate to or feels a part of. Somewhere along the line, she meets this character played by Franz Rogorowski, who he's almost like his character almost you don't even really know. Um, it's almost as if it's not bound in reality. It's almost like he's a figment of her imagination. But at the same time, it is very real. This is of what I've seen from Andrea Arnold. It is easily the most heightened and most like detached from reality that her films have felt. The most dreamlike. And from what I've seen of her films are very, very gritty and like glued to the ground in terms of just how neo-realistic they feel. And this kind of feels like a bit more of a fantastical kind of approach to her type of storytelling. And what is, at first this kind of odd couple matchup between Bailey's character and Franz Rogorowski's character, who goes by the name of Bird, which is the film is titled after, obviously. A very unlikely friendship blooms, and he's kind of cut from the same cloth in that he does not connect with other people. He doesn't really have any friends or family to relate to. Although part of his history comes into play in the film, is a big part of the film, and you're kind of watching this juxtaposition of somebody very young trying to figure it out and an adult who has been kind of left behind in this world that continues to move, and they are relating to each other in that sense. They have found that they have a common ground there, and he is not just a great friend of hers and a companion, but almost like a guardian angel, like kind of like somebody looking over her when everything else around her is falling apart. And this is a wild film. Her style is like so far up my alley. Like the camera work, a lot of natural lighting, I think. Just you can almost see dirt, like grime in the corner of the lens, and that, I mean, her films just feel so grimy and gritty, and just her style is one of a kind. And then you look at the soundtrack, which, I mean, is straight up my alley. I mean, some of my favorite bands are featured in this film, and you know how it is when some of your favorite artists musically, when their music is in a film, it's like that is the first thing that pulls you in, and from the get go, a lot of the music also sucked me into it. But everything about the film was just so emotionally impactful, and I don't know, I just thought it was incredibly beautiful. Absolutely adored it, and I was a wreck when I left that theater. I was just beside myself. I don't know, everything about this film, about what it means to be a teenager, finding your place where you fit in, but also even from somebody like Barry Keoghan's character or Franz Rogorowski's character, watching these adults, kind of that idea that even as an adult you do not have it figured out and you're not making sense of this environment that you're in, but you're trying to survive in it. And I don't know, to me that's kind of what this film is. It is this juxtaposition of growing pains as a teenager, but also growing pains as an adult trying to lead a younger generation. And I don't know, I loved just about everything about this film. I hope more people see it, and I mean, I don't even know where you can find it. It's just been so limited, and I just have not seen many people talk about it at all. But I don't know, I need to do some big catching up on Andrea Arnold's filmography. Kind of like Dan Flash's, and I Think You Should Leave. Her style is my exact style. Next up at number 4, a film I've been championing since I saw it back in, I think it was May when it had its theatrical release, and it has not left my mind. When I saw this film in the theater, when it came out in May, it was immediate, like, this is a top 10 film of the year for me. And it felt pretty much locked in. Like, it was, as soon as I saw it, I'm like, this is going to be in my top 10 at the end of the year. I'm going to be shocked if something else pushes it out. I need to talk about it. And it's probably one of, if not the film I'm the most excited to talk about on this entire list I put together. And that is Challengers by Luca Guadagnino. I think I hinted that when I was talking about Queer, I would be talking about another one of his films, and this is it, man. one of the most refreshing, most unique films I saw all year. And this is a film that like I have died on the hill that this film is amazing and I love it. That stance for me feels kind of polarizing. And the reason why I say that is because I have told friends about this movie and family about this movie, and I'm like, you gotta watch Challengers. It's just such a an intense, just beautiful, massively entertaining film. Trust me, you gotta watch it. And the reaction I get from a lot of friends or family is kind of like, oh, well, I'm not into tennis. I'm not either. Oh, I don't really, care for Zendaya as an actress. I don't really understand that either. And these are like barriers for some people when it comes to this film. I've told friends again and again. I'm like, man, you got to watch Challengers. Trust me. And I think I've seen some people have their criticisms about it. Some people who don't love it as much as I do, but I've seen so many people coming out of the woodwork and having this as a top 10 film, top 5 film, number 1 film of their favorite films of 2024. And I'm in the same boat, man. It's kind of one of those films where when you see it, you're like, I didn't know I needed this. I didn't know I wanted this, but hell yeah, I'm glad we have it. Again, I'm not somebody who's into tennis at all, but tennis is not necessarily the forefront of what this film is. Everything about this film works because it isolates romance into this powder keg of a scenario where the romance is a competition. Watching these characters, who two of them are friends, and watching them grow throughout the years, and watching Zendaya's character Tashi Duncan kind of interject herself or insert herself into their relationship, and watching their relationship fray, watching romance between one of them and then the other, and watching all of that unfurl. And there's so many interesting ways in terms of the way Luca Guadagnino structures this film, and that the timeline is not coherent, and it's not chronological. There's so much jumping around, and there's so much time and so much development to each of these characters and what they go through on this journey. It becomes this very like intense, very petty, pesky rivalry. The romance and the lust and all of it. It tennis is a mode. It is a vehicle. It is a language, almost like music, to express the frustration and the competition between all these characters. I don't know. I think it's just like woven together perfectly. And never for a second does any of it feel unnecessary. There's maybe one scene I would, if it was up to me, there's one scene that's a bit too on the nose. Other than that, I thought this movie was damn near almost perfect. Like it is just like this constant rush of adrenaline between conversations, between dialogue, between the characters, when you're jumping in and out of the tennis match that Mike Faced and Josh O'Connor's characters take on. It's just like you almost got to slow down and catch your breath a little bit, like it's galvanizing watching how this all plays out. I've been talking a lot about music in terms of films I've seen this year. My favorite original score of the year, this film. Now, I have a background of being a fan of Trent Reznor and having a background of his work doing film scores with Atticus Ross. This score is kind of like watching Trent Reznor kind of like just a little bit step back to his roots with industrial sound, with like Nine Inch Nails, but almost cross blending it with like an LCD sound system type sound. And I cannot stop listening to this score. I go to work and I listen to it, and I come home and I think it's just like, it is just such a groove. And the fact that this score was not nominated for Best Original Score at the Oscars, it tells you everything you need to know about the Academy and how they handle music. I've never ever been a fan. I mean, really altogether, I've never really been a fan of the Academy's choices when it comes to music. And this lack of acknowledgement for this soundtrack, it's like, at this point, it's my opinion, but at this point, the Academy has their head in their ass in terms of what they think good music is, or a score to a film. I just don't understand how it couldn't be recognized. It's just, it's a bit more modern and out there for maybe some of the older alumni of the Academy voters, but like it perfectly suits the energy of this film and everything Luca is doing and putting together the story. It is such a perfect like backdrop for all of it, and I'm just thinking about the songs in the soundtrack, and they're already like they're such earworms. I got them in my head right now just thinking about it. So favorite soundtrack of the year, no question about it. Totally elevates the film. That I already loved everything about it, and just the breakneck speed of the editing and the way everything's woven together, even in and out of the timeline, which is always jumping back and forth. It's just kind of like a tennis match, back and forth. And again, I will champion this film until the day I die. Well, okay, that's a bit intense. I will champion this film continuously, and I will continue to recommend it to people, whether people take my recommendation or not. I don't know, but like again, do you need to be a fan of tennis to get this film or enjoy this film? Hell no. Do you, like trust me, trust me. If that's something that may have been putting you off watching it, don't. Movie's wildly entertaining, and just so well put together. Again, my boy Josh O'Connor. I mean, I could just speak his praises for days and days. Mike Face is a guy who I really like too. I remember being introduced to him from Steven Spielberg's West Side Story. I thought he was awesome in that movie, and no surprise here, he's awesome here as well. And Zendaya, again, I think it's something with the mega celebrity profile of her that people like. I've this is just my experience online, but I see some people kind of like dump on her and be like, "Oh, she's not that great of an actress." I don't understand that at all. And this performance of hers here is the best I've seen from her. I've seen her in some feature films. I haven't seen the Euphorias and whatnot, so I can't comment on that. But from the feature films I've seen her in, I mean, this is the best performance I've seen from her, and I think she's perfect for it. Like, I think she's just perfect for it. Love everything about this movie. The one film on this list that I was probably most excited to talk about. And I often look back on like top 10 lists that I've made in the past. And if you're a sports fan, you might understand what I mean when like you can go through like a draft order in sports and look at players and then 5 years, 10 years down the line, you look at it and you're like, man, how did that player get picked so low? How did that one go so high? This order is all out of whack. Now that we know what we have, doesn't make any sense. I often look at my old movie lists, and even a year later, 2 years later, I would rearrange all the movies I picked in my top 10. This is a film that in a couple years from now, honestly, it may have been my number one. Like, I've got it at 4 here. The rankings are starting to lose meaning, and I hate ranking things altogether, but I feel like in a couple years from now, I might look back on this and think that it was my favorite film of the year. I may have put it low, but yeah, again, a film I'll never shut up about. Now, the next 3 films I'm going to talk about here in the top 3, to be completely honest, I don't even know how to rank these next 3 films. I hate ranking things, but I continue to do it. I guess I only have myself to blame. These next 3 films, it might as well be a 3-way tie for number 1. It's like almost don't even recognize what number I put it at. It might as well be a 3-way tie for the top spot. And the film I'm talking about is Hard Truths, a film by Mike Leigh. Mike Leigh has quickly been becoming one of my favorite filmmakers ever. I've only seen a handful of his films. I just watched Life is Sweet the other day, which was one of his older films from the 90s, which I thought was awesome. And I mean, he's been making films for a long, long time. And if you know the score with a guy like Mike Leigh, very much almost in a way like Andrea Arnold, low to the ground, neo-realist. His films deal with human beings and relationships and, who we are as people and how we connect or fail to connect with our loved ones and friends. And in Hard Truths, Pansy, played by Marianne Jean-Baptiste, is a woman that she's angry. She's pissed and and she is not good at communicating, and she's the type of person to lash out on an employee at a grocery store or to interfere with an act of physical affection, PDA, with some young lovebirds, and she is just very misunderstanding of the world and does not fit into it and is very angry at it. As much as she is willing to dish it out and let others feel her wrath for how annoying and obnoxious all of it is, not that many people are listening. A lot of some people tune out, even if it's her husband or her son or her sisters and relatives. Everybody kind of knows what they're getting with Pansy. And she's just like a hurricane when she goes into any room. A lot of people are either kind of like her sister in the film, equipped to deal with it, or some tune out and completely abandon her. For a good portion of this film, it almost operates like a comedy in that sense. Explosions and her antics and how she interacts with people and confronts them about these things that upset her. And it's funny because, like I said, I was watching Life is Sweet, an older Mike Leigh film. There's another character in that film that is almost kind of cut from the same cloth. And eventually that frustration and that resentment to everything is going to hit a boiling point. And we're going to understand that it's not just anger. Anger is not the only emotion that exists for this character. The anger is a representation of something much deeper underneath the surface. And that is what this film becomes. It goes from what feels like a very, like a very frantic, intense comedy on social faux pas and how they drive us up the wall. But what it becomes is a character study on a character who is very, very broken, and something has died inside. And we're going to figure out exactly what it is that Pansy's struggling with. She might not say it. She doesn't say it. But that's the beautiful thing about the way Mike Leigh does these types of characters and these types of stories. She doesn't have to tell you how she feels or why she feels that way. The way she behaves, whether it's with what she says or even if it's nonverbal cues, the character's emotions are going to come to the forefront and they're going to tell it for us. And Mike Leigh is such a master at that. In terms of filmmakers I've come across, I have not come across many like that are as good at it as Mike Leigh is at understanding and conveying mental struggles when it comes to things like depression and anxiety and PTSD. There's even some touches on something like agoraphobia in this film. He is one of the very best I've ever seen do it. He completely understands it and knows how to represent it. And that's what you're seeing in this film. You're watching anger be kind of like the Trojan horse in the situation, but what it's carrying inside is all these other much more vulnerable emotions and conditions that Pansy has. And at some point, it's going to hit the tipping point. And when it does, this film is just, man, it hits you like it just hit me like a train. It is just a very emotional experience about watching somebody who would like to connect with other human beings, but it's almost like physically impossible for them to do it. And that frustration is what you're seeing on the surface, and every other character is trying to crack underneath it and figure out what it is that's going on. And I've seen him do this in other films of his, and he's just so amazing at showing how to authentically portray it. Again, goes from a high wire comedy that I couldn't stop laughing at, and by the second half, it was a train wreck that just destroyed me emotionally. And from what I've seen from Mike Leigh so far, it seems like a lot of his films do that. Now, one of the most important things to mention about this film, Marianne Jean-Baptiste, who plays Pansy, my favorite performance of the year. I talked about awards season and getting shafted in that. I know why she didn't get nominated, and from what I've heard, Bleecker Street, the studio behind Hard Truths, has not had a great history with being able to campaign for awards and whatnot. It's a shame. It also illustrates why awards don't matter all that much. This is far and away the best performance I've seen from any actor or actress this year. Full stop. I don't even have to think about it. It's the best performance I've seen this year by a country mile. It looks like the most draining, high wire balancing act, and how intense all of it is. like I just can't imagine. It's just one of those performances where you genuinely you're just like I don't know how that person does it, but she's like a master of her craft, and that performance is just. I think when we look back on the 2020 decades, at least for me, it'll end up going down as one of the best performances of the decade. Absolutely phenomenal. That's it. I'm a hard truther. So that's so stupid. Number two, Nosferatu by Robert Eggers. I don't know where to start. I feel like I'm not even going to say much about this film. The next two films here, at 2 and number 1, are very obvious picks for me. I know myself. I know what I like. I know who I like. Robert Eggers is one of my favorite filmmakers working today. This film blew me away. I love his brand of authenticity when it comes to trying to create a world from the ground up that feels lived in and feels like a relic of the past and kind of bringing us back there. How immersive his films are when it comes to doing that. Everything about it, from the way this film looks to the portrayal of Nosferatu, which I don't care if he has a mustache. I thought it was. I just thought that this movie was damn near perfect. There are so many sequences I could highlight that were ones that like were just jaw dropping to me. I just don't know what to say about this movie that hasn't probably already been said. I don't know. There's just nobody like him making those films that look visually like this. That it's almost like this world exists somewhere, and how good he is at creating it. For me, it's the story of Nosferatu is like a cross between the classic vampire and the way it looks in this film, almost like part Exorcist when you're watching what Lily Rose Depp's character is going through, and the doctors who are using the learnings of the occult to get to the bottom of these visions that she's having, and just how demented and gothic all of it feels, and the way that the whole plague part of it is depicted. I was choked up with emotion watching it. Like I talked about with The Brutalist, how people say they don't make films like they used to anymore. I hate when people say that. But this was one of those times where I was sitting there just thinking, we do not get films like this very often. And I say that every time I see one of Robert Eggers' films. Do I love all his films evenly? No. Is this my favorite film of his? No. But it's a damn close second. And I don't know. I just loved every second of being in this world and being consumed with its like demented gothic style. I just loved everything about it. I just remember leaving the theater and just thinking, holy shit. It's one of those films. It's one of those films where when you see it, you're silent afterward. Like you're just sitting there kind of processing what you've just been through. And I was just blown away. And I'm not surprised. Again, it's just a very predictable pick for me. And now, down to brass tacks, the creme de la creme, the number one, or at least my favorite film of the year, which again, Hard Truths or Nosferatu could easily go in that bunch. It's one big three-way tie. And for me, this pick is very predictable. For me. I kind of felt the same way last year when I picked my favorite films. At the top is just a film that you knew was going to be there. And for me, that film this year was Anora by Sean Baker. Sean Baker is one of my favorite filmmakers. Full stop, one of my biggest artistic influences. He is a guy that I have looked up to for a long time, over a decade. I often champion his films and gush about how much I love them. I'm not sure to who, now that I think of it, but really he's a guy that, kind of like Mike Leigh and kind of like Robert Eggers, I just want to shout from the rooftops every time I see one of their films about just how great they are. And Anora is my guy Sean Baker getting his day in the sun. This, he's had films in the past that have done well critically, and in terms of awards season, like The Florida Project. But this is really the biggest moment of his career, no questions asked. And you're watching a filmmaker who went from small indie roots, making films with camcorders, making films with iPhones. Tangerine was my introduction to Sean Baker, and I never looked back. I was totally consumed by his films. And Anora is probably the most outrageously entertaining and the most heightened and Hollywood his films have ever felt to me. but they're also very much still from the DNA of his grounded, lived-in neorealistic style. Like this film is so cartoonish in a way, but it still has the same, like a blood relative of films from the past like Tangerine or a Takeout, or a Florida Project that feel very, very rooted in reality. And then when he made Red Rocket, he started to get a bit more cartoonishly comedic. And Anora's kind of an extension of Red Rocket, and I love Red Rocket. Um, and he's just continuing to go in that direction, and it just works awesome here. Mikey Madison, who plays Annie, Anora, the title character, probably the most iconic character we were given this year, at least in my opinion. And I absolutely love her performance. Everybody in the supporting, from Yura Borisov to Karen Karajulian, and everybody in that troupe. When you hit that point in that film where this film completely tilts and goes on this comedic heater, it's just like this like train wreck that does not slow down. Every one of those films where the jokes happen so quickly and land that you're still recovering from the previous joke before you can even get a hold of the joke that's in front of you. It's just an avalanche of comedic, thrills, and it's my type of film, and again, this is coming from a guy who's been a fan of Sean Baker for a long time, but this film not just highlights everything I love about Sean Baker's films, from his sense of humor to how he inserts his characters into what feels like a very real world. A lot of parts of this film, when they're in Vegas and they're running around bragging to everybody that they got married, you could tell they're talking to regular people. There are scenes in this film where they're communicating with real pedestrians, and you can feel every bit of it, and he's been doing that for a long time. How lived in these films feel, and how authentic, almost documentarian they feel. This is the most his films have almost felt like a mutation between his own style and somebody like the Safdie brothers from films like Good Time or Uncut Gems, like that anxiety-riddled panic attack. That characteristic is somewhere in this film, and it's just not surprising that it's my number one, because that's just like my ideal. That is straight down the narrow fastball in my wheelhouse. I knew it would be near the tip-top of my list. And when I saw it at TIFF, I was able to see Sean Baker in person. That was a treat. That was special for me. And I got to see the whole cast in person and listen to them talk about how amazing it was to make this film. And everything about this film's just kind of, everything this year has just kind of revolved around it for me. It's the only film on this list I've seen multiple times. I'd like to get to the other ones and see them again, but I just haven't had a chance. But yeah, it just kind of felt like a foregone conclusion that everything in the list was going to revolve around Anora, and that I was juggling the last couple films on this list trying to figure out where to put them, but it just didn't feel right moving this one down to talk about another. This is a film that I'm going to be watching for years and years to come with tons of rewatchability. And, the thing with Sean Baker is, with a film like this, it's not just his indie neorealist roots, but he's a guy. The thing I love about his films is that he has this like very like juvenile, almost teenage slapstick, crude humor to him, and it's never like too low. Like he's never not allowed to have fun with it. But at the same time, at the emotional core of this film, where this film ends up, it is heartbreaking, and he's just so good at juggling these highs and lows. And I love this movie. I love Anora. I knew it was probably going to be my number one. Predictable pick for me. If it wins Best Picture at the Oscars, and then people start hating on it because films that get more popular get hated on for some reason, I'm not looking forward to that. But if him and the crew of this film get acknowledged at the Oscars, it's going to be exciting. He deserves it. He's had a long career, and he's done a lot, and he's been a hardcore enthusiast and devout ambassador of cinema and the cinema going experience. And I'm just very, very happy for one of my greatest influences in filmmaking. So yeah, I'm glad you stopped by to check out the list and see what I've had to say. And feel free to leave your favorite films in the comments and let me know what your favorite films were, what order you would pick. Again, this list is just my personal opinion. It's not fact. It's not absolute. It's just my personal opinion, and I'd love to hear yours. So we'll create a discussion in the comment section about what your favorite films were. And hell yeah, keep watching great movies. I'm going to try my best to do that as well. It is good to make videos again, even if I find it kind of exhausting. I'll be back soon making other types of videos. I'm not too sure yet. But until then, oh, you can follow me on Letterboxd at Nick Koss, which is cool. You can subscribe to this channel, and you can hit that thumbs up button, which I think does something. And until next time, take care of yourself, and I'll see you later.